Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. This is going to be the start of a sort of little mini-series of videos. I recently did a video talking about the very slow and kind of lackluster rollout that we had for Power Rangers Dino Fury toys, and it brought up a lot of comparisons, both in the video and in the discussion in the comments, of comparisons to Bandai, and I thought it would be fun to take a look at how Hasbro and Bandai compare so far. Obviously, it's a little bit unfair right now because we're so soon into the Hasbro era, and they haven't had a chance to really do a lot, and they have a lot of stuff around the corner, and this isn't meant to be a video series like belittling one or the other, just kind of more an interesting discussion on what I like and don't like about each one's approach, and because it's kind of a so far video, it's something I can update later when we get more toys from Hasbro. But so right now, this first video will be about the basic main figure line. I will do one about the Megazords, one about the Morphers and Roleplay, one about the Collector's line, and then possibly somewhere in there maybe one about like the other category, like the cool non-show stuff, or the non-show stuff that ends up being in the show, if you know what I mean. But this is about the basic figures. The basic figures for me in some ways have always almost been the center of the toy line, because when you hear about any new season, that was kind of one of the first things you would see on the shelf or see spotted. So it's kind of synonymous in my brain with the excitement of a new season. When you see the brand new figures on the shelf and the season's just full of potential, you don't know the Rangers yet, they're just exciting new suits and possibility. And you know, we had years of different evolution for Bandai. You know, we kind of started with those 8-inch figures, were kind of the first ones, the too hot to handle commercial ones, if you guys remember that. And then like the flippables, and then for Zeo and Turbo we did flippables as well. We also had weird thumb looking figures, and then around In Space through Overdrive, we basically settled into this muscly style of figure. Various different mold styles, but for the most part it was always a muscly, slightly articulated figure. We'd experiment with some gimmicks, some voice activated, some light up, some like kick action gimmicks, but we kind of settled into that general status quo, and that's kind of what Power Rangers figures always were to me. I never knew people were that mad about it until I joined the online community. Like a lot of things, it never really bothered me that much, because again, like when I was younger, like that was just kind of the way it was. Now obviously now I see why it's so different and why I kind of prefer the more accurate ones, but for just collecting the history, I like them. This isn't a history lesson. The point is, that's kind of what Bandai basic figures were. Then we hit Jungle Fury. Jungle Fury and RPM, in my opinion, are the two best basic figure molds we've ever had to this day, especially Jungle Fury. They were well detailed, they had better proportions, they had good accessories, they did a very good job on those. Then they decided to scale back for our basic figures to small figures with mmpr 2010. That again had weird big hands, and then Samurai and Megaforce, they had just smaller ones, better proportions, and they weren't bad. I prefer the 5-inch scale for me for a Power Rangers mainline figure, but the 4-inch figures they did for those were not bad. And then we went back to the Action Hero line. That was pretty much what we had for the rest of Bandai's run. From Super Megaforce to the end of Super Ninja Steel was Action Heroes, which honestly I thought were fine. They weren't the best, but they weren't overly muscular. They were detailed enough, you know, I was fine with them. Then so going into the Hasbro era, that was actually the thing I was most worried about, because I love the basic figures, and you know, Hasbro kind of has a weird category with those when I was looking at other lines, because you know, with Star Wars you kind of have the classic 3.75 figures, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan of that scale for Power Rangers. I know some people love that scale for everything, but that's not my jam. Then they have, the closest I could think of was sometimes in Marvel, like in Avengers or Spider-Man, they would have a 5-inch real basic figure, but for the most part when I saw those on shelves, they were pretty poor looking. I wasn't really a fan of them. Like outside of a couple Spider-Man ones I picked up for Into the Spider-Verse, they were actually pretty solid. And so I was pleasantly surprised by Hasbro's. I think that they do a very solid job on them. I think they're a pretty decent mold. They're pretty accurate to the proportions. You know, they're not overly muscular. They have pretty good details. And for the most part, we get all of the main stuff you see in the show. And just in terms of what they looked like and how they released, it didn't feel that too dissimilar from Bandai. It felt like I was right at home. It felt like my tradition was right there. So it's like, which one does it better? I mean, that's kind of subjective, and like I said, Bandai has a really long history. I would say for me, I have a soft spot for Bandai's old figures and just the way they handled it, especially like the Jungle Fury and RPM. But if I was to be sort of objective, which is hard to say since it's my opinion, I would say they're about even. Because I don't think Hasbro's really done anything that's made me too mad in the basic figure department. Outside of Blue's helmet on Dino Fury being messed up, and they don't come with their swords, but just talking about the figures themselves, from my more overall experience from Beast Morphers and Beast Morphers Season 2, I think that they're about even in terms of Bandai in their prime, quote unquote, once they figured out how to make more realistic looking Ranger figures and Hasbro's. And you know, I just made the video about how Hasbro's distribution is weird, and setting the recent distribution aside, it's not all that different. I found that it wasn't until near the end of Beast Morphers that I had trouble finding figures, but that wasn't a foreign concept to Bandai either. I remember having to get the Super Dino Charge figures, all of them, on Kmart.com, and then there was stuff like some of the late Jungle Fury and RPM figures I had to find at like Big Lots and stuff, and it's arguably easier to get your hands on some of those late game Hasbro ones that might not appear in stores because you can find them online. Because back with Jungle Fury and RPM, they weren't really as readily available online, so I don't know. For me, I would say they're objectively about even, but I always have a soft spot for Bandai in my heart in terms of collecting the 5-inch scale figures there. So, what's your guys' opinion on this? Which ones do you prefer? I'm sorry, I'm still going with that. Which ones do you prefer? Do you prefer classic Bandai 5-inch figures or Hasbro's? And which one was your personal favorite of the 5-inch ones? As I said, mine was Jungle Fury. Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can catch my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.